The Galactic Council chamber was built to impress. It was vast, round, and filled with glowing crystal lights that floated in the air like stars. Representatives of many alien races sat on curved platforms, their voices low and filled with a mix of confidence and curiosity. This meeting was important, and almost everyone in the galaxy wanted to hear the outcome. At the center of the chamber, High Chancellor Valen, an elder alien with long silver scales, raised his hand for silence. The hum of conversations stopped at once. Then Valen's voice carried across the chamber. He spoke with authority, his words translated into hundreds of languages at the same time. He declared that the human species would not last long in the coming war. According to his advisors and military experts, the humans would be defeated within hours, perhaps even sooner. His prediction was not challenged by most. The Council had faced many new species before, and most had fallen quickly to the advanced powers that ruled the galaxy. Many alien representatives agreed with him, some even laughing softly. To them, Earth was young, small, and unprepared. They believed humans had only begun to explore beyond their own planet, and that their weapons and ships were simple compared to the massive fleets of the galaxy. A few whispered that it was a waste of time to even discuss the matter. They thought humans would surrender as soon as they saw the Clyran fleet above their skies. But not everyone was so sure. On the far side of the chamber, a human representative sat quietly. Her name was Laura Carter. She wore a plain, dark suit, and compared to the elaborate robes and glowing armor of other delegates, she looked unremarkable. Her calm eyes studied the chamber, moving from one alien face to another. When the Chancellor's words echoed across the hall, she did not rise to argue. She simply folded her hands and listened. Those who noticed her silence took it as a sign of weakness, a sign that even the humans themselves knew they would be defeated. Antine and Laura knew better. She knew the Council's mistake was not in their numbers or their calculations, but in their lack of understanding. They judged humans by the size of their fleets and the age of their technology. They did not understand the willpower that drove humans, the way they fought when pushed to the edge, the way they refused to break even when logic said they should. She thought of her people back on Earth, the long history of wars, struggles, and survival. Humanity had always been underestimated by those who looked only at the surface. Meanwhile, the Council continued their debate. A tall, bird-like alien with golden feathers spread his wings as he spoke. He described in detail how the Clyran fleet would crush Earth's defenses. He claimed their ships could withstand endless barrages, and that humans lacked the resources to fight back. A reptilian delegate added that Earth's orbital defenses were weak and poorly positioned. Charts and holograms filled the air, showing predictions of human defeat within the first few hours of battle. Each image was met with nods of approval. And some aliens spoke with cruel amusement. One short and stocky creature with 3 eyes said that humanity's end would be entertaining to watch, a lesson for other young species who might grow too bold. Laughter rippled through parts of the chamber, cold and dismissive. Laura remained still. She did not smile, she did not frown, she simply waited. If she spoke too soon, her words would be drowned in their pride. If she spoke too loudly, they would accuse her of arrogance. She had no need to convince them now. The truth would reveal itself in time, and Valen raised his hand again. "It is decided," he said, his silver scales glinting in the crystal light. "Humanity will fall in hours. The Clyran fleet will ensure it. The Council recognizes this truth, and we shall move forward." And there was applause, sharp and echoing, from many parts of the chamber. The decision seemed final. Predictions were logged into records, and broadcasts carried the Chancellor's words across the galaxy. Civilizations far and wide heard that Earth would be crushed, and most accepted the news without question. Traders, soldiers, and even ordinary citizens repeated the prediction in markets and ports. Humanity, they said, was doomed. Laura rose at last. The movement drew some attention, though many ignored her. Her voice was steady, her tone quiet. "The Council may predict," she said, But predictions do not decide battles. Battles are decided by those who fight them. And her words echoed, carried by the translators. Some aliens sneered, others chuckled, a few frowned, sensing something in her calm tone that they could not explain. Valen tilted his head, watching her with eyes as cold as stone. "Your courage is noted," he said, almost mocking. "But courage without power is meaningless." And Laura did not answer him. She simply bowed her head slightly and returned to her seat. She had said enough. To argue further would be wasted breath. The council would not believe her, not until the moment came when belief would be forced upon them. Journeys the session ended. The chamber slowly emptied. Groups of alien delegates gathered together, exchanging confident remarks about the coming battle. They spoke as if the outcome was already written. None of them seemed concerned. To them, humanity was nothing more than a minor obstacle, a stepping stone in the endless history of galactic wars. Only a few, silent and thoughtful, left the chamber without joining the laughter. They had seen the look in Laura's eyes, the kind of calm that came not from ignorance, but from knowledge. Outside the chamber, the news spread faster than light. Reports, predictions, and commentaries filled the airwaves of countless worlds. Artists created images of Earth burning. Analysts wrote about the speed of its defeat. Betting markets opened, with odds heavily against humanity. In the great cities of alien empires, people gathered around glowing screens waiting to witness the battle that would soon come. Now Laura walked alone through the long corridors of the council station. Her steps were steady, her expression unreadable. She thought of Earth, of the men and women preparing for what was to come. She thought of Captain Daniel Brooks, who would be leading the fleet, and Commander Natalie Hayes, who would direct the defenses. She trusted them both. They did not need the council's belief, nor did they need its approval. Humanity had always stood on its own when it mattered most. She paused at a window, looking out into the endless black of space. Stars burned bright, silent witnesses to countless wars and struggles. Somewhere among them, the Clearan fleet was already moving, confident in its power, certain of its victory. Laura whispered to herself, words no translator would carry, words no alien would hear. They do not know us. They never will. None her. Reflection stared back at her from the glass, small and simple against the vast cosmos. Yet behind that reflection was the weight of all human history, the memory of every struggle, every fight for survival, every moment when surrender was not an option. She knew the council had made its choice, and she knew the galaxy believed it. But she also knew something else. Predictions could be broken, and in the battles of humans, minutes could change everything. The council chamber's lights dimmed as the station shifted into its night cycle. Far away, Earth prepared in silence. And though the galaxy laughed, humanity was ready to write its own truth. On Earth, the mood was very different from the pride and laughter of the Galactic Council. In underground command centers and aboard silent warships, humans were preparing with quiet determination. There were no cheers, no loud speeches, only calm orders and disciplined movements. Every soldier, every pilot, and every commander knew what was coming. They had trained for years for a moment like this. Annan and Captain Daniel Brooks stood inside the main command deck of the human flagship. The ship was not the largest in the galaxy, but every part of it had been carefully built for war. He looked over the glowing screens that showed the positions of the Earth fleet. Rows of smaller ships were moving into formation, their engines glowing like faint stars. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He understood that the council thought they had no chance. To him, that only meant the element of surprise was on their side. Nearby, Commander Natalie Hayes worked with her team at the tactical station. She was quick and precise, her voice clear as she gave instructions to the ground units and orbital defenses. Her hands moved across the screens, linking communications, checking supply lines, and making sure every fighter was ready. She believed in preparation. To her, every detail mattered, because a single mistake in battle could mean the loss of thousands of lives. The soldiers and pilots under their command were not afraid. Many were young, but their training had been hard and realistic. They remembered Earth's long history, the wars that had almost broken nations and the disasters that had forced humanity to stand together. That history had shaped them into fighters who did not give up easily. They were not the strongest, nor the most advanced, but they had learned to adapt, and that was their greatest strength. In the training yards, pilots checked their fighters one last time. They touched the wings and engines as if the machines were alive. Mechanics worked in silence, tightening bolts, sealing panels, and fueling weapons. The air smelled of oil and metal, mixed with the faint hum of engines waiting to roar into space. A young pilot named Aaron Carter adjusted his helmet and looked at his squadron with a firm smile. He told them they would not be remembered for losing, but for standing their ground no matter the odds. And in underground, far beneath the cities, civilian volunteers worked beside military engineers. They loaded supplies, prepared shelters, and ran drills to protect families in case the enemy broke through. Even children were taught where to go if alarms sounded. Humanity was not waiting helplessly. Everyone had a role and everyone accepted the weight of it. Earth had been underestimated too many times in its own history, and this time would be no different. Above the planet, the fleet moved quietly. The ships were smaller than those of the Claren Empire, but they were fast and built with clever designs. Each had been tested in secret war games. Each had been improved by lessons learned from old battles. The Council had laughed at the size of Earth's ships, but Daniel knew their real power was not in size. Their power was in coordination, in teamwork, and in the will of the humans who controlled them. Natalie studied the holographic map of the solar system. She marked the positions where the Claren fleet would most likely appear. Her team ran simulations adjusting for speed, numbers, and possible strategies. Every time the simulation predicted human defeat, she changed the variables looking for new solutions. Hours passed, but she did not rest. She believed there was always a way to win, even if the odds were impossible. And on the surface of Earth, cities prepared in silence. Streets were empty of celebration or fear, but filled with quiet action. Hospitals were stocked, rescue teams trained, and energy grids secured. Farmers continued to grow food. Miners worked to gather resources, and scientists monitored the skies. Humanity did not stop living, but everything they did was done with the knowledge that battle was near. It was not panic that guided them, but resolve. That night, soldiers gathered in small groups, speaking softly about their families and hopes. Some wrote letters, unsure if they would return. Others sat in silence, staring at the stars, knowing the enemy would soon come from beyond them. There was no bravado, no arrogance, only the steady understanding that their fight would matter. Humanity had faced extinction before, through war, disease, and disasters, but they had always found a way to survive. This was no different. And Daniel walked through the corridors of his ship, speaking to his crew. He asked if they were ready, and each one answered without hesitation. They trusted him, not because he was the strongest, but because he carried himself with calm confidence. He did not promise them victory, but he promised them that they would fight with everything they had. To his crew, that was enough. Natalie joined him in the command deck later that night. The two stood together, looking at the silent stars beyond the glass. She asked him if he thought the council was watching. Daniel smiled faintly and said he hoped they were, because they were about to see something they could never predict. Natalie nodded, her eyes focused and sharp. She told him that the enemy would make their move soon, and when they did, humanity would be ready. In the distant dark, the sensors caught faint signals. The Claren fleet was approaching, their massive ships cutting through space with heavy engines that shook the void. Reports came in quickly, showing their numbers, their speed, and their formation. To most, it would have been terrifying. To the humans, it was the moment they had trained for. Daniel gave the order to prepare. Sirens sounded quietly across the fleet, not in panic but in precision. Pilots boarded their fighters, soldiers loaded their weapons, and command stations came alive with lights and signals. Earth's defenses powered up, shields rose, and hidden weapons on the surface unlocked from their shelters. Every part of humanity's plan moved into place, like pieces of a puzzle coming together at last. And Natalie stood over the tactical map, her hands steady as she gave the first commands. Fighters spread out into hidden positions, cruisers adjusted their angles, and ground batteries aimed toward the skies. Every unit moved with discipline, No hesitation, no wasted action. The silence before battle was deep, but within it was the sound of determination. The humans were ready, and in orbit, Aaron Carter sat inside his fighter, breathing slowly. He looked at the photo of his sister tucked into his console. He whispered that he would come back, then sealed his helmet. Around him, his squadron tightened their formation, waiting for the signal. They were not afraid. They had no illusions about the size of the enemy, but they knew their own strength came from unity. They were part of something bigger than themselves. Non-Earth, families gathered in shelters. They held hands, not in fear, but in solidarity. They trusted their soldiers, their commanders, and their leaders. They knew humanity had been called weak, fragile, and unprepared. But they also knew that humanity had always fought hardest when it mattered most. In the silence of those shelters, prayers, promises, and quiet songs filled the air. Back on the flagship, Daniel and Natalie exchanged a look. It was not a look of fear, but of understanding. They knew the battle ahead would decide more than Earth's safety. It would decide how the galaxy saw humanity forever. They would not just be fighting for survival. They would be fighting to show the truth of who they were. The signal came at last. The enemy had entered the outer edge of the system. The Clearan fleet was vast, their ships stretching across the darkness like a wall of metal and fire. The Council had predicted Earth would fall in hours, but Daniel and Natalie stood ready to prove them wrong. The humans did not speak of surrender. They did not speak of defeat. They only prepared to fight. In the command deck, Daniel gave the final order. His voice was calm, steady, and filled with the quiet power of conviction. The fleet moved into position, and the first sparks of battle began to light the dark. Humanity's resolve was no longer hidden. It was about to be revealed to the entire galaxy. The first moments of the battle came like a storm. The Clearan fleet appeared from the void, their warships shining with cold blue lights. They were massive, like floating cities, and they moved forward with the confidence of predators. The Council had sent observers to watch the fight, and their broadcasts spread across the galaxy. Billions of eyes were fixed on the battle, expecting to see Earth's defenses crumble within minutes. Captain Daniel Brooks stood tall on the command deck of the flagship. His crew moved with precision, their hands running across controls, their eyes focused on the glowing screens. He gave no long speech. He only said a few quiet words. "We fight smart, we fight together." His crew nodded. That was all they needed. And Commander Natalie Hayes was at her station studying the tactical map. Red lights marked the enemy fleet, and blue lights showed the human ships. The enemy outnumbered them heavily, but Natalie's mind was sharp. She had studied their movements, their patterns, their weaknesses. She raised her voice clearly, giving the first commands. Fighters launched in groups, moving like streams of light into the dark. Cruisers shifted position, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Clearan commander, sitting in the grand chair of his colossal warship, sneered when he saw the human fleet. To him, the ships of Earth looked small and fragile, like insects facing giants. He ordered his gunners to open fire. Bright beams of energy shot forward, burning through the darkness, aimed straight at the human lines. None but the humans did not meet the fire head-on. Instead, Natalie's orders guided their ships into sudden maneuvers. The fighters twisted and dived, dodging through the deadly beams. Human cruisers split into smaller groups, spreading out so the enemy could not crush them in a single blow. The first volley missed, and for the first time the Clearan commander frowned. And Aaron Carter, inside his fighter, felt the ship shake as energy blasts streaked past him. His squadron followed his lead as they darted between enemy fire. He remembered his training, keeping calm even as the void lit up around him. He spoke to his squadron with steady words, reminding them to stick to formation, reminding them that they were not alone. Together, they broke away from the main fleet and circled behind the nearest Clearan ship. When they reached striking distance, Aaron gave the signal. Missiles launched in perfect unison, streaking across the darkness. They struck the rear of the massive ship, where its shields were weaker. Explosions tore through the metal and the giant ship shook. For the first time, a Clearan vessel burned. Across the human fleet, cheers rose in small bursts, but the discipline held. There was no time to celebrate. The battle had only begun. And on the Council station, alien observers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had expected to see human ships destroyed in the opening minutes. Instead, they saw the humans moving with speed and precision that no one had predicted. Some whispered in surprise. Others frowned, unwilling to admit the humans were doing better than expected. And back on the flagship, Daniel ordered the cruisers forward. They fired their weapons in carefully timed bursts, striking the enemy's weak points. Instead of wasting fire on shields, they aimed at engines, weapons, and joints in the armor. Human tactics were ruthless and exact. Every shot had a purpose. Every move was planned to open the enemy further. Natalie worked quickly, giving instructions to squadrons across the system. She used the human fleet's smaller size as an advantage, letting them slip through gaps in the enemy formation. She directed hidden ground-based cannons to fire at precise moments, striking enemy ships when they drifted too close to Earth. One by one, cracks began to show in the Clyran wall of metal. The Clyran commander roared in anger. He ordered his ships to close in to crush the humans quickly. His fleet shifted, heavy ships moving forward like a storm of iron. But as they moved closer, the humans struck again. Mines hidden in the darkness exploded, tearing through their formations. Fighters darted in and out, hitting weak points before racing away. The humans fought not with size, but with speed and clever traps. Aaron's squadron continued its deadly dance. They flew between the massive ships, too small and fast to be tracked easily. Lasers streaked past them, but the fighters twisted like sparks in the wind. Aaron targeted another weak point, this time on a command vessel. His squadron struck hard and the alien ship broke apart, exploding into burning fragments. The shock spread across the enemy lines. And on Earth's surface, people watched the skies, knowing their fate rested above them. Families huddled in shelters, listening to the faint rumble of distant cannons. In command centers underground, officers tracked the battle with tense eyes, sending updates to the fleet. No one spoke of fear. They only whispered quiet words of hope. And in the council chamber, silence grew heavier. Alien leaders leaned forward, unable to believe what they were seeing. The prediction had been clear. Earth was to fall in hours. Yet only minutes into the fight, the humans had destroyed several enemy ships. Their lines had not broken. Their fleet still moved with discipline. What was supposed to be a simple show of dominance had become a real struggle. Anna and Natalie noticed the shift. She could see the enemy starting to break formation. She told Daniel that this was their moment. Daniel nodded and gave the order. Human cruisers surged forward together, their weapons firing in unison. The combined firepower ripped through another Clyran ship, then another. The void lit up with flames and debris. The humans pressed the advantage, refusing to give the enemy time to recover. Aaron's squadron flew low across the belly of a massive battleship. Enemy gunners fired wildly, unable to hit the small, darting fighters. Aaron led his team straight to the ship's weak point, a glowing reactor vent. Their missiles struck true, and the battleship exploded in a storm of fire. The blast shook nearby ships, causing chaos in the enemy fleet. Nan, the Clyran commander, shouted at his crew, his pride now burning with fury. He could not believe that humans, the species the council mocked, were cutting through his fleet so quickly. His orders grew frantic, his control slipping. His fleet began to stumble, their movements less sharp, their fire less focused. In and on the human flagship, Daniel and Natalie exchanged a look. They knew they were winning, but they also knew the battle was not over. The enemy still had numbers, still had strength. Yet for the first time it was clear humanity was not weak. They were fighters, and they would not fall as predicted. And the broadcasts carried every moment across the galaxy. Billions watched in stunned silence as human ships cut through giants, as small fighters turned titans into wrecks. On distant worlds, people who had laughed at the thought of human resistance now whispered in disbelief. The story was changing before their eyes. And Laura Carter, back on the council station, watched the screens with calm eyes. She had said little before, but now she felt a quiet satisfaction. The council had made its prediction, but the humans were rewriting it in real time. She could see the panic on some alien faces, the doubt on others. Humanity was showing the truth without needing a single word. In the cold of space, the battle raged on. Ships burned, fighters darted, and explosions lit the darkness like stars being born. Minutes passed and the Clyran fleet lost more ships. The humans fought with everything they had, each movement sharp, each strike calculated. Their discipline, their unity, and their willpower were stronger than the galaxy had ever imagined. The prediction of ours was already broken. Humanity had lasted longer than expected, and not just lasted, they were winning. The Council's certainty was crumbling, replaced by the undeniable sight of human defiance. The battle was far from over, but already the story of Earth was changing forever. The battle had turned into chaos for the Clearan fleet. Their commanders had expected an easy victory, yet now they struggled to keep their ships in order. Human tactics were too fast, too sharp, and too unpredictable. Ships that should have been untouchable were falling apart one after another. The humans fought with a kind of focus and unity that no one in the galaxy had expected. And on the flagship, Captain Daniel Brooks stood steady as the deck shook from a distant blast. He did not flinch. His voice remained calm as he gave orders. Hold formation. Keep pressure on their flank. Don't give them time to breathe. His crew answered with firm voices, their hands moving quickly over controls. The screens showed explosions where enemy ships once stood. Commander Natalie Hayes worked at the tactical station, her eyes sharp as she read the shifting map of the battlefield. Red enemy markers moved in confusion, breaking formation as they tried to respond to the human assault. She saw the gaps, the mistakes, the weakness in their moves. Her voice carried with clear authority. Shift Squadron 7 to Sector 9. Redirect fire from Cruisers 2 and 4 to the lead battleship. Strike it now! And the human fleet responded instantly. Fighters cut through the enemy like knives through fabric. Cruisers poured fire into the weak points Natalie had spotted. A massive battleship shuddered under the assault, then exploded in a storm of fire and debris. The shockwave rolled across the void, rattling other ships and forcing them apart. And inside his fighter, Aaron Carter felt the vibration of another near miss. His squadron stayed tight behind him, weaving between bursts of energy fire. His voice was calm, almost steady like Daniel's as he led them toward another target. Stay sharp. Aim for the engines. His squadron answered as one, and their missiles streaked out together. The enemy ship lit up with burning explosions, slowing, then drifting helplessly before it tore apart. In the council chamber, the silence was heavier than before. Delegates who had laughed now sat frozen, their faces pale or unreadable. The prediction of ours was gone. Only minutes had passed, and yet the humans were not losing. They were winning. Holograms of the battle filled the chamber, showing Earth's small fleet cutting through giants. Whispers spread among the representatives, doubt replacing arrogance. And Laura Carter remained in her seat, quiet and calm. She had said almost nothing during the earlier meeting, but now her silence carried weight. The alien leaders glanced at her, their pride breaking as they tried to understand what they were seeing. She did not need to remind them of her earlier warning. The truth was plain before their eyes. And back in the battle, the Clearan commander roared in rage aboard his flagship. His pride was wounded deeper than his fleet. He gave orders to press forward, to crush the humans with overwhelming force. His massive warship surged ahead, supported by several others aiming directly for the human flagship. The enemy commander wanted to break Daniel's fleet in one decisive blow. Daniel saw the move. His expression did not change, though the situation was dangerous. They're coming for us, he said quietly. Natalie nodded, already seeing the same. Then we use it against them, she replied. Together they worked quickly, adjusting their strategy. Orders spread across the fleet and human ships shifted position like pieces on a board. And when the Clearan ships charged, the humans appeared to retreat. They pulled back, drawing the enemy closer, giving the illusion that their flagship was vulnerable. The alien commander laughed when he saw it, believing victory was finally in his grasp. He ordered all guns to fire, and the void lit up with beams of deadly light. But then the trap was sprung. Hidden behind drifting wrecks, human cruisers powered up and opened fire at once. Their weapons struck the Clearan ships from the side, tearing into their exposed flanks. Fighters swarmed in from above and below, raining missiles and laser fire. The enemy formation shattered under the sudden assault. One warship exploded, then another, their burning hulks colliding with others. Daniel gave the final order with calm clarity. All ships focus fire on their flagship, and the human fleet responded as one. Cannons fired in rhythm. Missiles streaked across the darkness, and fighters dove in with relentless speed. The Clearan flagship shook under the combined assault. Explosions ripped across its hull, tearing away armor and breaking its engines. The once proud warship that was supposed to lead a quick victory was now burning in the dark. The enemy commander shouted in fury and disbelief. He refused to retreat, even as his ship broke apart around him. But his refusal changed nothing. In the end, his flagship exploded in a blinding wave of fire, sending shock across the battlefield. The Clearan fleet faltered at once. Their leader was gone and their courage with him. And Naren's squadron cheered over the comms, but Aaron himself stayed focused. He reminded them not to get careless. "It's not over yet," he said firmly, even as the wreck of the enemy flagship drifted into silence. He knew battles could turn quickly, and he was not about to let pride cost lives. The remaining Clearan ships tried to regroup, but their lines were broken. Some fired wildly, others tried to retreat, and many were left drifting without control. The human fleet pressed the attack with merciless precision, cutting down ship after ship. Minutes passed, and the once mighty fleet was reduced to burning wreckage scattered across the stars. On Earth, people listened as updates came through. Voices on the radios spoke of victories, of enemy ships destroyed, of humanity holding strong. Families in shelters looked at one another with tears in their eyes, not of fear but of hope. For the first time since the enemy appeared, they believed they might survive. And in the council chamber, the silence was broken only by the sound of explosions echoing from the holograms. Delegates sat frozen, unable to speak. Some covered their faces, others stared in disbelief. The great prediction of human defeat had been destroyed before their eyes. The words of the Chancellor, spoken with such certainty, now seemed foolish. Laura Carter finally stood, her voice quiet but strong. "You see now," she said simply. "You see what we are." And in the battle above Earth was nearly over. The last Clearan ships tried to flee, but the humans did not let them go easily. Cruisers fired on retreating ships, and fighters hunted down those that tried to escape. Humanity had no intention of leaving enemies who might return to strike again. One by one, the last enemy vessels were destroyed. Naren's squadron flew through the wreckage, their eyes scanning for stragglers. The stars were filled with burning fragments, drifting like broken moons. His voice was heavy with relief as he reported, "No more targets." Around him, his squadron cheered again, but this time their joy was mixed with exhaustion. They had fought harder than ever before, and they had won. None on the flagship. Daniel exhaled slowly, his hands finally relaxing on the console. The deck was quiet, filled with the low hum of systems returning to normal. He looked at his crew and gave a single nod. "We held the line," he said. Natalie stood beside him, her face pale with fatigue but bright with determination. "We did more than hold," she said softly. "We changed everything." The galaxy watched in silence as the battle ended. What was supposed to be humanity's quick defeat had become a victory so fast and so shocking that no one could deny it. Minutes had changed the course of history. The name of Earth, once dismissed and mocked, now carried new weight. Humanity had shown the galaxy who they truly were. The battle had ended, but the effects of it rippled across the galaxy. The Clearan fleet was destroyed, their ships reduced to burning debris drifting in space. The humans had won, not in hours as the Council predicted, but in minutes. News of the victory spread quickly, carried by transmissions and observers across countless worlds. Alien species who had once laughed at humanity now whispered in shock and awe. In and on Earth's flagship, Captain Daniel Brooks walked through the corridors checking on his crew. The atmosphere was tense but proud. There were no celebrations. Yet, victory was serious, earned through precision, courage, and teamwork. Soldiers and pilots moved quietly, their faces showing fatigue but also determination. Every person aboard understood the importance of what they had just done. Commander Natalie Hayes reviewed the tactical map, still showing the broken remnants of the enemy fleet. She spoke calmly to her officers. "Make sure all survivors are accounted for. Check every sector. The battle is over, but our duty continues until everything is secure." Her voice carried authority, and the officers responded with efficiency. There was no room for error. Humanity's victory had to be complete. Aaron Carter and his squadron returned from their final sweep, their fighters moving in perfect formation. They landed safely, exhausted, but unbroken. Aaron removed his helmet and looked around at the young faces of his team. They were tired, Their clothes and gear scorched in places, but their eyes shone with pride. "We did it," he said quietly. No one needed more words. They all understood the weight of their achievement. And back on Earth, families emerged from shelters. The streets were filled with people looking up at the stars, knowing they had been saved. Some cried quietly, others embraced loved ones. Even in distant cities and towns, the same scenes unfolded. Humanity had survived the challenge that the entire galaxy thought would destroy them. And they had done it not with size or overwhelming power, but with courage, strategy, and unity. In the council chamber, silence reigned. The delegates stared at the screens showing the human fleet returning home. The prediction of ours had been shattered, and the weight of that failure was clear on every face. Whispers began to spread, some expressing disbelief, others fear. To many, the humans were no longer a minor species. They were a force to be reckoned with. Laura Carter stood quietly in her seat, watching the reactions. She did not gloat, nor did she celebrate. She had seen the outcome and had known it was possible. But now the galaxy could not ignore the truth. Humanity was strong, not because of technology alone, but because of spirit, courage, and determination. She had always believed in her people, and now the universe had to see what she had known all along. The alien observers on distant worlds sent messages to their leaders, warning them that the humans were not weak. The words that had once spread mockery now carried caution and respect. Strategic plans had to be rewritten. Fleets that had counted on easy victories had to reconsider. Earth had become a symbol of unexpected power. And on the flagship, Daniel spoke to his officers. "We have won today, but our work is not done. Humanity must remain ready. Other fleets may come, and we must be prepared. Remember this victory, but also remember the lessons we learned." His words were firm, reminding everyone that vigilance was as important as courage. Natalie stood beside him. She nodded, her eyes scanning the tactical map one last time. "We showed the galaxy who we are, but now we strengthen, we plan, and we prepare for what comes next." Her tone was calm, yet it carried the weight of authority. The human fleet had proven itself, and it would not falter in the future. Aaron and his squadron gathered outside, looking at the stars they had fought among. They felt pride, exhaustion, and a sense of belonging. They had been part of something larger than themselves, a story that would be remembered in human history and across the stars. Aaron spoke softly to his team. "We did what we had to do. Humanity is not weak. We are strong." They all nodded, understanding the truth of his words. Non-Earth governments and leaders began to send messages to allies and distant species. They broadcasted that humanity had survived and defeated a fleet far larger and stronger than their own. The tone was firm, clear, and respectful. Humans were not asking for recognition, they were stating a fact. Earth had earned its place in the galaxy not through arrogance but through action. The Galactic Council faced its own reckoning. High Chancellor Valen sat quietly, reviewing the outcome. His pride had been shaken, his predictions proven wrong. Delegates around him avoided eye contact, each considering how the humans had defied their expectations. The lesson was clear: never underestimate humanity. And Laura Carter finally left her seat and walked through the empty chamber. She did not need to speak. The silence was acknowledgement enough. Humans had fought, humans had won, and the galaxy had learned a lesson that would not be forgotten. She thought of Daniel, Natalie, Aaron, and every person who had fought for Earth. She felt quiet pride. Their courage had changed history. Across the galaxy, alien civilizations reevaluated their strategies. Traders, soldiers, and scholars debated what had happened. Humans were no longer considered a minor threat. They had shown speed, skill, and determination that few species could match. Plans for future conflicts had to take Earth seriously. Humanity's victory in minutes had shifted the balance of perception and power. And on the surface of Earth, celebrations began quietly. There were no loud parades yet, only the slow return to normal life, but with deeper understanding. People knew their species had faced a threat that seemed impossible and had emerged victorious. The sense of unity and pride grew, strengthening the bonds between communities and nations. Humanity had proven its strength not through arrogance, but through resilience and courage. Daniel walked on the deck of the flagship, looking at the stars that had been the battlefield. He knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had shown its power, but the galaxy would not forget. Other challenges would come, other enemies would rise. But humanity had learned its own strength. Daniel thought of the words he would tell his crew. We are not just survivors. We are fighters, and we have shown it to the galaxy. Now Natalie joined him, her eyes bright with determination. She looked at the stars and said quietly, Today the galaxy learned something new. They learned what humans can do when we fight together. Daniel nodded, feeling the truth in her words. They had changed the perception of their species forever. Aaron and his squadron gathered once more, speaking quietly of the battle. They remembered every maneuver, every strike, every moment of fear turned into action. They understood that humanity's victory was not luck. It was skill, discipline, and courage. We made history today, Aaron said softly. His squadron nodded, sharing the quiet pride. In the council chamber, delegates slowly returned to their duties, their voices quieter, their confidence shaken. Predictions would have to change. Plans would have to be revised. Humans had demonstrated power that no calculations had expected. Earth was no longer a small, weak planet. It was a player in the galaxy, one that could not be ignored. None Laura. Carter returned to her seat, feeling the weight of her people's achievement. She knew the council would learn slowly, and perhaps reluctantly, but the lesson was clear. Humanity had endured, fought, and won. They had proven themselves in minutes what many had predicted would take hours to destroy them. She smiled quietly, not with triumph, but with understanding. Her people had shown what they were capable of, and the galaxy would never forget it. Anne's night fell on Earth. Lights glimmered across the planet. Families celebrated quietly, soldiers returned to their posts, and leaders began to plan for the future. Humanity had faced the impossible, and they had not only survived, they had triumphed. The story of Earth's victory would be told for generations, not as a tale of luck, but as proof of what humans could do when they fought together with courage, skill, and determination. Across the galaxy, alien species would remember. Humanity was no longer the species to be underestimated. The humans had shown the truth. They were fighters, survivors, and a force that could change the course of history. The prediction of hours had failed. Humanity had ended the battle in minutes, leaving a lesson that would echo across stars and worlds forever.